Hello, I'm still not Corey, and I'm also still on the left. So I've seen a couple of ladbibles agree to disagree series, and then I saw there was a left versus right one and thought, why not watch that on camera? And now I'm doing that. But before we start the video, please check out my merch at normalcitizen.store. I've got stupid baby t-shirts, they are new. And I've also got unicorn beanies, which are like subtle pride beanies as well. Those are also new. We're running out of these ones. We're also running lower on these ones. So please go and get them before you can't anymore. Also, let me know in the comments where you are politically. Are you a lefty? Are you a liberal? Are you centrist? You right wing? What's your deal? Let me know. Also, like this video and subscribe because it really does help out the channel. That's it. Let's start the video.
I think that safe spaces can be used as a kind of escape route when it's just, oh, I need some time out from this particular issue.
I feel like people that are on the right don't necessarily understand what a safe space is. So, for example, a women's shelter could be a safe place. An LGBT nightclub could also be a safe place. Safe places are just places you can go to feel more comfort or escape oppression or violence. Safe space is a very broad word, and it's somehow come to mean like, my Twitter is my safe space where no one can ever say anything. Safe spaces are important, bear in mind. I just don't think that people have an accurate idea of what safe spaces are.
And it can be used as a way to shout down someone else's opinion. There's a lot of danger in modern debate for people just saying, I can't bear to hear what you're saying because it's offending and triggering me too much. But sometimes you need to hear the things that other people find offensive.
See, this is what I find interesting. Sometimes need to hear the things that other people find offensive is true, but also when it comes to certain debates right now, for example, debates about trans people, maybe trans people don't need to be hearing TERFs tell them that they're not who they say they are, right? Like that's not necessarily something that you need to hear, because bear in mind, trans people are hearing this often outside of these debates anyway, right? That is happening anyway. Trans people shouldn't have to go into debates and have their identity questioned, and also to have that position be seen as reasonable, because it isn't. And this doesn't just apply to trans people, this applies to anyone who is arguing for their own rights, right? Like, if you are detached from it, then sure, it is very easy to say, yeah, no, I think people need to hear the hard thing. It's all well and good to say that people need to hear things that are difficult for them to hear, but when those difficult things are bigotry and they're already experiencing that constantly anyway, I don't think that's really an appropriate thing to say, because people are experiencing it. The issue is not that people are saying, oh, I don't want to hear anything that challenges my ideals. And to be fair, some people are saying that, but that's not, what the greater conversation is about. It's not about being challenged in regards to your ideals or certain beliefs. It's more about being challenged in regard to your identity or your rights as a person, right? Like your value as a human being. That is what's being debated, and that's what people take issue with. We really shouldn't allow bigotry to have such a public platform, but we do. And that is a problem. And yes, discourse is good. And yes, open conversations are good. But letting bigotry just seep its way into these public debates and conversations doesn't necessarily make the bigotry go away. You can't just argue out of it because it's not necessarily a logical or rational position. So you're not even fighting the same game.
So sometimes you need to listen to stuff which you don't agree with and find a way to argue back to it rather than kind of hide in some sort of bunker, which is a safe space.
I'm not sure hearing an idea you disagree with is what they're being kept safe from, though. Because when you say safe, the opposite of safe is basically being in danger.
Yeah.
And if people feel like they're in danger, I feel like maybe we should listen to them.
I think people should be allowed to express opinions that other people violently disagree with, and you should be encouraged to have proper debates about it.
See, this is the thing. I don't think having a safe space means that people can't voice their opinions that other people violently disagree with. But equally so, why is she on this side of people need to hear things that they disagree with? Like, I'm curious to understand what she's talking about. Like, if she was to give an example, that would be really great. Because to me, when people say, oh, I think people really should be exposed to the ideas they disagree with. Yeah, obviously, you should be able to hear arguments that you disagree with and come up with ways to argue your point against that. That's perfectly valid. But when it's arguments about, again, you as a person, I feel like that that becomes more difficult. Like, you need a safe space. You shouldn't, by virtue of being, like, you know, Muslim or Jewish or LGBT or a person of color, have to argue for your rights as a person all the time, right? You deserve to have a safe space for you to go to so that you do not need to have these debates about your identity, about your rights as a human being. If you think that bigots should be allowed to express their opinions whenever they want, fine. But people that they're expressing those opinions about have the right to not have to listen to that all of the time. When people have this position, I feel like they're talking about something quite different, right? Or they just don't get it, because living your daily life and having people constantly like demoralize and demean you can be kind of sucky, right? It's not fun. And so being able to have a sort of escape from that can be incredibly useful and also necessary.
But I mean, the definition of safe space seems to be protected from ideas that they may find offensive, and I don't think people should be protected from ideas that they find offensive.
See, I disagree with that, right? Like, being able to be protected from ideas that you find offensive is good in, you know, in some context, right? I'm not saying that people should be constantly and completely avoiding all ideas that they disagree with. Absolutely not. You should expose yourself to different ideas. You should expose yourself to things that you disagree with. You should be able to understand why you believe what you believe and defend that to some degree, right? Obviously, I think it's important that you should be able to interact with ideas that you disagree with. I do it constantly. But the problem is that you should have the option of whether to engage with that or not. Because again, I'm talking about bigotry here. And like, if we're just talking about like silly ideas that don't really have any impact on people's lives, then that's one thing, right? But when it's actual things that actually impact people, then like, yeah, you should be able to have some protection for those at least some of the time. I don't think that people should always have to be exposed to ideas that they disagree with or find offensive or repulsive or find to be potentially harmful to themselves. For example, I tend to engage with a number of racists, but if tomorrow I decide that my Twitter is actually my safe space away from racism, and I'm gonna block everyone on my feed that I see posting anything remotely racist, or anyone that DMs me anything racist, or anyone that gets in my mentions with something racist, if I'm going to do that, then I can do that. I feel like that is a totally fine thing. And if I don't want to have to experience racism in day-to-day life, then yes, absolutely, we can deplatform racists. We can say that this is an idea that we don't think deserves a place in the public, right? Like, we can agree on that, right? Because it is a harmful idea. It is something that genuinely harms people. And we restrict people from harming people in other ways, right? So why is there this need to like not restrict people from harming people by spouting like just bigotry, right? Because the idea here seems to be that like it's not harmful or you should have to argue it. But as I've said again, people should not have to be in a constant battle just because other people are prejudiced against them. Like, you're putting the onus on the people who are being marginalized, not on the people who are marginalizing others.
I didn't even think this was a controversial point.
This is, yeah, she's right. It's not a controversial point. Austerity has cost lives. That's a fact. It's factual.
I thought it had.
What? Go on, explain.
I was just reading that 130,000 disabled people have died because of austerity. Tell me your point, because I didn't even think I thought this was a fact.
In a way, I completely see what you mean, and I think hollowing out public services can be an absolute nightmare.
Oh, it can be an absolute nightmare, can it? All those disabled people dying because they can't get the benefits. Oh, bloody nightmare. Can be a nightmare. Dear me, this is why, and I assume she's a Tory, right? I'm gonna have to assume that she's a Tory. This is why Tories bother me, because this is just background noise to them. This is just something that is acceptable, right? Oh yeah, I think it's bad to hollow out public services. It can be a nightmare. Do you really think it's that bad? Do you really understand the gravity of it? Because people are dying. It's not just, oh, it's a night. People are dying because of austerity, right? Like, that's it's a bit more than just a nightmare.
I think it's quite hard to say that definitely a lack of money was the problem behind X, Y, Z, whatever.
Sure,
sometimes it's kind of broken systems, and that sometimes there's just, you've got to cut money out and find another way to solve the problem.
It's just there was a lot of money for Brexit. After Theresa May said there was no magical money tree for things like mental health services, homelessness services. And I mean, when they launched an inquiry into whether and why the homelessness problem had gotten so bad, I thought, this is astonishing, and I feel like they would be able to see it with the naked eye if these people ever walked anywhere.
Yeah, it is interesting, right? Politicians will say, there's no money for this, and then find money for something that they find valuable. The fact is that it isn't an issue of there being no money. It's an issue of there not being an incentive for them to do it. They don't care. There are a certain number of lives that they deem it acceptable to be lost, and that number is just a little bit below the public rioting and getting you out of office, right? Like that seems to be where it is, right? Like, maybe if this many people die, it'll still be okay. The public won't get mad and I'll still be able to keep my position of power. I genuinely think this is the issue. People are homeless and people are dying because they can't afford to eat or they can't heat their homes. Like, that is awful. That is horrible. The number of people in the UK living in poverty is honestly despicable. And like, why? Why? Why is that not the primary focus? Why is it so difficult to give everybody a home when there are enough homes for everyone? Why is it difficult to feed everybody when there is enough food for everyone? Even just talking about the UK, there are enough resources for us all to live, and yet people are dying because people just don't care. It's not important. That is the issue, right? That like there are things that people find more important than homelessness or poverty. Things like, as she mentioned, Brexit. There was money for that. There's money for whatever they think is valuable, but there's no money for actual people. That is the problem, right? That is the problem with the Tory mindset, and honestly probably other parties as well, but we're mainly talking about the Tories here. No, wrong. The only way you can think that the UK does not have a problem with transphobia is if you think that the transphobia isn't a problem. You cannot deny that there is transphobia in the UK. You can only decide that you are okay with it.
I think it's dangerous to sort of bandy around the word transphobic too readily. There's a sort of level of skepticism which comes, not nasty skepticism, not sort of just kind of, let's analyse this huge phenomenon sensibly and see, and you've got to be allowed to ask questions when something this big is happening.
You know what else is dangerous? Underfunding trans healthcare and allowing TERFs to dominate the public conversation on trans people, to allow them to be dehumanized, to allow bigots to sanitize their ideas or give them the air of respectability under the guise of academia. That is dangerous. Saying that something that is transphobic is not dangerous. And I think that's evident in the fact that you can call something that is clearly transphobic transphobia, and there's women saying, oh, maybe not. Oh, I think we just need to have a conversation about it. Oh my fucking God. What if the conversation was about you? About an identity that you hold? What if the conversation was about whether you deserve rights, whether you deserve healthcare, whether you deserve to be treated the same as everybody else, whether you are who you say you are? I genuinely don't think these people have any shred of empathy. It's so frustrating hearing this sort of position that people have. And what is almost more frustrating is that she seems to be very, very tentative about it. She doesn't want to go out and say, no, I don't think this. She's like, we need to have a conversation about this phenomenon, and I don't think we should be calling things transphobic necessarily. What is the conversation that we need to have? Where is this conversation coming from? What evidence have you got that this conversation is necessary? What evidence have you got that this conversation isn't rooted in bigotry? Really? Why is this a conversation that we need to be having, whether trans people deserve rights? Like, that is obscene.
And see, and you've got to be allowed to ask questions when something this big is happening.
With literally any prejudice, you always get this. We got this with Islamophobia, you even get it with sort of fat phobia, people framing.
As I've said before, some people may be just asking questions, but are they looking for answers? Or in this case, it seems that they're only looking for the answer that they want, that trans people are not valid, we can treat them terribly, and call them predators. Seems to be the answer they're looking for. So, you know, makes sense that they'd want to continue the conversation until they get there.
You always get this. We got this with Islamophobia, you even get it with sort of fat phobia, people framing their arguments as concern when there's something a little bit nastier underneath. I actually think it's dangerous.
You know, she's actually spot on there with what she's saying. Like, this whole framing it as concern, this, I'm just asking questions. Like, when you dig down under every single layer, right? Because if you are just concerned, there are answers out there for you. If you listen to the TERFs, you're going to get lies. They're going to feed that underlying discomfort, that underlying bigotry that results in your concern. If your concern was just genuine concern and didn't come from a place of bigotry, it would be much easier to assuage those concerns with the facts. But the facts just aren't enough for some people. And TERFs can pull them into this just hole where they just go deeper and deeper and become more and more bigoted. And it is so often just this tiny seed of mistrust or disgust or, discomfort with some group that results in concern, which then leads to more overt bigotry. I don't think we should always take that concern at face value, because so often there is something more sinister underneath, as she so accurately said.
I actually think it's dangerous to sort of dismiss the people who are saying, actually, your concerns are hurting me. And so perhaps what's needed right now is much kinder language.
That's interesting. So what she's saying, it seems to me, is that there needs to be kinder language with the concern. I would argue that kinder language would not necessarily help. I've seen TERFs use kinder language, and all it does is make their position seem more reasonable to people. That kinder language is dog whistling, right? So I disagree with her there. I genuinely think that kinder language isn't necessarily the solution.
Brexit. Now you go.
Okay, Brexit. I honestly don't see what on earth he could have done in those circumstances. And I don't think that was his best move. I'm just defending. But I mean, obviously, when you look at it now and the mess that we're in now, whatever side you thought in the referendum on Brexit, whatever you believe on it, it does seem to be a mess.
I've never met anyone who thinks he was any good.
To me, it seems like she's very willing to defend him just because he's a Tory. I don't know. I don't know if that's actually the case, but she's saying, oh, well, what else could he have done? Yeah, I agree, maybe he wasn't the best, but what else could he have done? A good job, maybe. I don't know. It seems kind of wishy-washy to me.
He doesn't do anything. No. He's supposed to be the hope right now.
I want to say that, it's funny that people strongly disagree, and looking at this with the benefit of hindsight, we've ended up with Boris Johnson, and I feel like Jeremy Corbyn could have done a much better job than Boris, right? I don't get all the Jeremy hate. I genuinely, I don't understand it. I guess especially having had to have dealt with Boris. Could it really have been much worse under Jeremy? I don't think so. I genuinely don't think so. I think it would have been quite a bit better.
That's the main reason I'm furious with him, is that it's so embarrassing what's going on, and he's supposed to be the hope.
He's petty and sort of vindictive, and everything he says is so sort of small and so kind of trying to seek offence. He's just not the person to unite the country.
I don't necessarily agree with that, but also, I think that there are plenty of conservatives that are like that. I don't think that Boris Johnson is someone that can unite the country. I think that Boris Johnson is someone that's out for himself. So sure, criticise Jeremy Corbyn. I disagree, whatever.
I'm normally vote Conservative, but if there was a good Labour leader, a strong Labour leader who had ideas and had a way to unite the country and treated people with respect, then I would probably vote for that person.
I was recently, in the last few years, told by my mother that I'm Jewish. So I have this weird perspective where I actually identify with this group, and so I do hear the anti-Semitic dog whistles that happen. But also, because I don't present as Jewish, I hear what they say when the Jews leave the room.
Yeah, I just cannot believe that people it's so obviously happening. Just wouldn't get these brilliant Labour MPs feeling like the party doesn't represent them anymore. They're not making it up.
Yeah, had a problem. As far as I'm aware, it has been dealt with to some degree. I think there's a lot of anti-Semitism throughout the country. What is interesting, I find, is that Labour had or has a problem with anti-Semitism, but the standards for the Conservative Party seem to be so much lower that you won't say they have a problem with homophobia or they have a problem with anti-Semitism or Islamophobia and have that be nearly as big a conversation as the Labour having a problem with anti-Semitism conversation. And don't get me wrong, that I'm not saying we shouldn't talk about the Labour thing. I'm saying we should talk about the Labour anti-Semitism and also all of the other stuff from the Tories too. And if there's anything else like homophobia in Labour, like there's transphobia in the Labour Party right now, and that's a conversation that we should be having as well. I'm not saying that we need to diminish those conversations because other ones are lesser. Let's bring them all up because they are all very important conversations to be had. It just feels that sometimes when people bring up anti-Semitism in Labour, but not any of the other issues in other parties, it seems that they less have an issue with the anti-Semitism itself and more just want to take a shot at Labour. So yes, let's stamp out anti-Semitism in Labour and in every other party, along with all kinds of bigotry in our political parties. Like, absolutely. Yes. I'm surprised that's not a strongly agree.
I don't think particularly that the sort of higher echelons of the Conservative Party has a sort of institutional problem with Islamophobia. I think it's much more of a kind of grassroots Conservative Party members issue, but I do agree that it's a problem.
I have nothing to add, yeah, seriously.
Sure. I mean, I think there is a pretty serious problem with Islamophobia in this country, genuinely. And not just among the Tories, like, throughout this country, Islamophobia is rampant and it is so disgusting, honestly. And that's it. From that video, I don't feel like they were necessarily all that far apart from each other. Like, the person on the right wasn't terribly far to the right, the person on the left wasn't terribly far to the left, it seemed. It's interesting because you can see quite clear differences in the way that they view, say, the Conservative Party, but like, I don't think they are all that different. It's interesting to me when someone that's like that woman that was on the right says something along the lines of like, I would vote Labour if there was a leader that united the country. It's interesting because it kind of shows what they value. Like, it's not important that, you know, the Tories have let many people die due to austerity. It doesn't matter all of the problems with the Conservative Party. You'll still vote for them because you don't like the Labour leaders. Like, it feels like a very odd form of politics to me. But again, yeah, those two, they didn't seem to be all that far apart. It'd be interesting to see another one where they disagreed a little bit more. But yeah, it was very much kind of towards the centre of UK politics, I suppose. So that's that. I don't have much else to say to you. I guess the video is over now. Thank you for watching. Please leave a like on this video and a comment. Let me know if you are left-wing, right-wing, centrist, whatever. Tell me in the comments. Also subscribe, check out my merch, check out my podcast, all of those things. Join my Patreon. It's going down there. Those names are my patrons. Or you could also leave a one-time donation. Got the hiccups. You can leave a one-time donation at my PayPal, paypal.me/notcorry. I'll also put you in the credits of a video as well. If you do that, it'd be quite nice. What else is there to say? I don't know if there is anything else. If you want to see me do another one of these videos, let me know. Until next time, goodbye.